Welcome everyone. We're glad to be with us on this joint webinar together with our partners from metaphacts. We will be speaking on accelerated R&D, leveraging fair data fabric in the life sciences. My name is Ilya Nuzunov. I'm your host for today. I'm, by the way, with Ontotext. I'm taking care of business development and engagement with all our accounts in the life sciences, healthcare, and science, technology, and medicine publishing. Let me share some housekeeping notes in the beginning. In order to have smooth audio transmission, you will be on mute, but you can ask questions all the time using the Q&A box. We will dedicate a special time in this webinar for taking your questions at the end. All questions that we don't manage to cover due to time constraints are going to be shared with you in written form in the next days. Of course, the webinar itself is going to be recorded, so you will also get links to the recordings in a few days. We have prepared quite a good agenda for you today, which is a combination of slides and demos, interactive demos. So without further ado, let me introduce the speakers for today. The first speaker for today is Sebastian Schmidt, who is the CEO of our partner company, metaphacts. Sebastian has more than 20 years experience in the IT industry, during which he has taken multiple leading roles from software engineering to pre-sales, product management. At metaphacts, Sebastian is taking care of customer and partner-facing activities, and he is also leading digital transformation initiatives for all metaphacts customers in Europe, North America, and Asia. We also have with us Todor Primov, who is heading Ontotext Life Sciences and Healthcare unit. Todor also has more than 20 years of experience taking multiple roles as solution architect, project manager, and leader of multiple projects for global pharmaceutical companies. He is especially focused on delivering large-scale data integration, search, and analytics solutions. So here's the agenda for today. We will do very brief introductions of our companies. Sorry, guys, I was notified that I wasn't sharing my screen. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it now.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will do a brief introduction of our companies. Then we will tell you why actually knowledge graphs are so popular these days. We will also share some of the challenges that our customers share with us and how we address them with the use cases that we can cover together with our partners from metaphacts. Of course, we will allocate enough time to do some interactive demos. We will also tell you actually more about our joint offering and actually what is our approach and how we jointly deliver value. And as I already mentioned, we will leave some time for questions and answers. Okay, Sebastian, would you like to tell us a bit more about metaphacts first?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ilya. Thanks a lot for having us as part of this webinar and talking about our joint solutions for life science and pharma. So just a few words on metaphacts. We are providing solutions to our customers since 2014. We are headquartered in Walldorf in Germany, and we have a team really distributed all over the world with developers and part of our professional services in Russia, Australia, Ireland, and obviously in Germany. We are an independent software vendor, meaning the main thing we focus on is building and implementing our software product, Metafactory, which is a knowledge graph platform, meaning it sits on top of a graph database and allows it supports the journey of our joint customers from visual ontology modeling to out-of-the-box knowledge graph exploration, and all of that enabled by an underlying low-code platform which allows you to build applications on top of the knowledge graph. And we are supporting various users in different industries with that. So this is supporting everyone from the business user and domain experts interacting with the data in the knowledge graph through such a custom created interface, as we will also see later today, to the ontology engineer, application engineers building such systems, and data scientists interested in exploring the data in the graph.
Thank you, Sebastian. So some words about Ontotext for those of you who are not familiar with the company. So Ontotext is among the oldest and most established semantic technology vendors, and we're also happy to be among the leaders of the knowledge graph, emerging knowledge graph space. Here at Ontotext, we're focused around two main capabilities. One is related to consolidating huge volumes of diverse data, both structured and unstructured, in comprehensive knowledge graphs, aligning the data with the underlying model, which on its own is mapped to the specific needs of the business and the use cases. The other main capability of Ontotext is extracting facts and relationships out of unstructured data, both leveraging the knowledge graph, but also enriching the knowledge graph. In this way, we create the knowledge graph and we make it like a central data hub in the organization that contains all knowledge but an interconnected form. So you don't need to take care of siloed databases anymore. You need to create this abstract layer on top of your data and explore the different relationships that you can benefit from. Ontotext operates on different markets globally, and we are focused on several industry verticals, among which pharma and healthcare are quite central for the company. We're also happy to be members, including founding members of prestigious organizations like, for instance, W3C or the Linked Data Benchmarking Council, the DBpedia Foundation, and of course, the Pistoia Alliance. We do very heavy research and development, even nowadays. We participate in more than 50 R&D projects, and at every time with the company, we work at least on 5 R&D projects, which contribute to the product management delivery teams. So let me now tell you why knowledge graphs are so popular these days. This is because they provide a totally new perspective on top of your data. So if you're now used to think of your data as different data types, like for instance, clinical data or expression data, locked in different isolated databases, knowledge graphs gives you the opportunity to start exploring your data on a much lower granular level, starting from the data in terms of concepts and how those concepts are related to each other. This is extremely important because this could also be mapped to the specific needs of your use case. So as you can see on this diagram, you can actually start the transition and forget thinking about data locked in different data sources, but to do the natural transition, let's say, for instance, if your use case needs to cover diseases, you can then start navigating the graph and, exploring all symptoms that are related to a specific disease. Then you can decide to explore what are the drugs that are used to treat this disease. From this point onward, then you can use, let's say, for instance, what are the proteins that are targeted by these drugs, or you can even go on a lower level, granular level, by exploring some expression data and how, what is the relationship between genes, proteins, and how they're encoded and what tissues are encoded. And this is simply driven by the needs of your subject matter experts in your use case. This versatile nature of knowledge graphs provides you with the opportunity actually to use knowledge graphs in multiple ways. So you can use knowledge graphs as typical database that you could query against. You can use knowledge graphs as graphs that you can do network analysis on. And last but not least, you can use knowledge graphs as reference data stores that you can extract new knowledge on the basis of the facts that you already ingested and already know. So there is a moment of serendipitous discovery with knowledge graphs, which is extremely important when we deal with drug R&D and preclinical use cases. Here is a good endorsement example by Gartner. In a report called Data Fabrics at Augmented Intelligence to Modernize Your Data Integration from the end of 2019, Gartner speak about the importance of metadata and how the metadata should be modeled together with all its different relationships in a knowledge graph model. And this knowledge graph model actually reflects the needs of the business and could be understood by the business. I find this really important because this is a great opportunity for the business to drive the consumption of the data, starting from the use case, the definitions that they have, and the specific needs that they need to cover. The other finding of this report is that actually knowledge graphs, especially when it comes to metadata management and tracking down all the relationships between the different data points, turns out to be a vital point together with machine learning and augmented data analytics for the so-called data fabric paradigm that is so important nowadays for the enterprises. Let me give you some examples of the different types of use cases that we, together with our partners from metaphacts, are addressing even now with global pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, and many more. As you can see, we're pretty widely covering different phases from the so-called drug life cycle. Starting very early on with research and development, we now serve global pharmaceutical companies in use cases like therapeutic target discovery. For innovative biotech companies, we work on use cases for drug repurposing. When it comes to preclinical, we built together with metaphacts knowledge graphs for hypothesis testing, for instance, or for sample management. We also have a lot of use cases in manufacturing, especially around compliance, regulatory compliance. We are traditionally very strong in clinical because, as you know, the volume of data, especially the unstructured data when it comes to clinical trials, is tremendous. And here we can help by leveraging the knowledge graph, as I explained earlier, but also doing natural language processing or extracting automatically facts and knowledge out of enterprise documents. Here we have worked on use cases related to scientific communication, regulatory intelligence, or, for instance, clinical trial recruiting. When it comes to post-marketing phases, we have experience with use cases around identification of key opinion leaders for market access use cases, or, for instance, medical inquiries, analytics, and products labeling updates. As you can see, together with our partners, we can address a lot of use cases. The list is not an extensive one, and the technology itself is not does not have boundaries within those use cases. Toller, what about sharing some specific challenges that pharma companies are sharing with us and giving some examples how, by the way, we could address them with our joint capabilities together with metaphacts?
Okay, thank you, Ilian. This is what I'm going to do right now. Indeed, by the way, can you see my screen now? Just to be sure. Oh, no. Hello?
We can see it. I think you're not in present mode yet, but otherwise we see it.
Yeah. Good. Indeed, information is becoming the next big asset for innovative industries like pharma. And professionals in the pharma domain, they might have really very tough questions to find the answers for. And really, they can be really various type of questions, like, for example, optimizing the development of new therapies, and at the same time ensuring that the drugs are safe enough and have the proper efficiency for the patients. also to identify new applications of already established active substances and to market them for treatment of different conditions, or to analyze the competitive landscape to identify what the competition actually is currently researching and developing in order to better position the product portfolio for the next, let's say, decade. And at the end, also another very important question that they need to resolve at any activity is how they can cut some of the costs. And here actually another problem shows up. We have a lot of data. We have, which is actually good, but it can become a problem at a certain point when you would like to identify the proper information for solving your particular question. And we have data. We have proprietary data. However, it's scattered along multiple diverse disconnected data silos, which are not speaking to each other or having any connectivity. And in addition, we have very huge amount of valuable information in the public data sources, in the open data clouds, however, which is not very well connected with the proprietary data. And actually from here, some of the main problems occur. It's a significant challenge to integrate highly heterogeneous and diverse data sources into a form that will allow you easily to identify, to provide you with the meaningful insights over a specific problem. And then to be ready to easily analyze the data that you have identified, to process it down the stream of analytical stream with additional algorithms and methods in order to solve your problem at the end. And it becomes even more challenging when you would like to ensure that your information is up to date. You need to establish complex data update procedures to maintain the version control over the constantly evolving and providing new data facts to solving your case. And all these experts in the pharma and healthcare domain, they can define different type of use cases to formulate their questions in the form of a use case. I'll try to be in the role of system biologist. This is just a sample of the possible use cases. It's the full set of possible use cases. And if, as a system biologist, I would like really to understand the molecular mechanism behind a certain disease condition, to identify the gene to disease association, what type of proteins are involved, how they interact with other proteins and other biological processes within the organism, how they can be affected by different substances, possible drug candidates. And this can translate into simple questions like, for example, show me all the interactions between certain set of proteins that are targeted by a specific drug, and actually the expression of those tissues, those proteins is limited to a specific tissue. And what I will expect as a result is will be a comprehensive list, a result list of all the candidates that match my criteria, with an opportunity to dig deeper in the complete data records to identify all the specificity of those protein targets, and optimally to represent them into a connected graph, which will be able to be explored intuitively to identify distant relations, different affected objects, and so on. For that purpose, we can build a multimodal preclinical knowledge graph that will integrate different classes of information covering proteomics data, genomics data, molecular interactions, pharmacological information, clinical data if available, and any other relevant type of classes of information. However, the main challenge is that although these public data sources are well established and some of them have really very well modeled RDF data represented, they still are not very well connected. And actually, here comes our data inventory that we keep up to date with more than 200 different biomedical data sets with all the necessary additional semantic mappings included in as part of each data set, which will ensure that loading all this data in a single RDF triple store will automatically build a highly connected knowledge graph.
Todor, allow me a quick question here about the data inventory. Could you tell us a bit more about what are the ways to consume data from this data inventory? I mean, what are the different models of provisioning, if you will, that you offer? Is this something like a data as a service solution, or?
Yeah, exactly. This is more or less a data as a service subscription solution, which will allow you to subscribe to updates of all the supported by the data inventory data sets. And once subscribing to a certain data set, you are going to get an up-to-date RDF version. This includes all the publicly distributed in RDF format data sets, but also all proprietary data formats, like, for example, clinicaltrials.gov, which is not available in RDF, to be consumed as an RDF. And in addition to the RDF representation of the data, you are going to get all the additional improvements in the data normalization of this data source, including medical codings for example, the disease, the reported adverse event and disease conditions for the clinical study, or coding with the specific drug dictionary for the different treatment arms of the clinical study. And this will, as I said, will subscribe you to the service, and you are going to receive regular updates both for the raw data, the additional semantic mappings, and additional quality assurance, which is based on Shackle Shape's validation of the RDF model that the transformation was correct and validated by our rules collection. So for the particular demo that Sebastian will later on show to you, we have created a knowledge graph out of 7 public data sources, which results in 1.3 billion facts loaded in the knowledge graph with an inference rate of 1.4 expansion ratio for new inferred facts. And on top of this knowledge graph, we have created a couple of use cases that we can demonstrate later on. I'm going to show you really an overview of exit from this mode. Yeah, this is the actual demo system in which we have GraphDB loaded with all the different data sets. And each data set, this is an important clarification, is loaded in a separate context, in a separate knowledge graph. This includes also the semantic mappings, which allows us a really very granular control over updates and improvements, if necessary improvements needs to be done on the mappings of the data set itself. I have created a sample exploratory query here that aims to just subset a specific portion of the huge knowledge graph of 1.3 billion triples, and to extract specific information or sub-network of interacting partners in the knowledge graph. Actually, what we do here is to collect all the disease objects which are treated with a specific, in this case, and limited only to endometrial neoplasm, which are treated with specific drugs, and for those drugs to retrieve which are the target protein molecules. Those target protein molecules we would like to filter only for objects expressed in uterus, and for those proteins we would like to retrieve all the interacting partners above a certain threshold for the interaction, and to see in what pathways these interacting partners participate. Yeah. So I have created this query. If I run it, it will pull out all the necessary data in an RDF that you can consume. And you can use this configuration to build the visual graph exploration like this. This is the same query, but already as part of the configuration of the visual graph. If I execute it, it will load all the objects from the knowledge graph satisfying this particular criteria. As you can see, I'll try to zoom in out a little bit just to give you a high-level overview of the data. Yeah. And I'm going to zoom in. And for example, this is a protein that interacts with another protein. And as you can see, these are the limitations that we have defined. A tissue protein expressed in a tissue, isolated from, this is the predicate. And this protein actually this drug has a target molecule, this particular protein, and this particular protein is actually the starting point for all the retrieving of all the different interactions through this exact match mappings that we have created as an additional match. So without these exact matches here, we were not able to retrieve all the interactions from StringDB, which are coded by Ensembl protein identifiers. So that's why we need to create these mappings in order to improve the connectivity and to ensure that we can trace from one class to another and to reconstruct this whole network of interacting partners. As you see, it actually overloads you with information, and it's probably not the optimal way how you can explore the huge knowledge graph that we have built. So for that purpose, here comes the role of metaphacts and providing much better, much granular configuration and access and exploration on top of knowledge graph with their metafactory platform. Over to you, to Sebastian, to explain more about the metafactory.
Thank you, Todor. So let me quickly take over sharing. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So what you're seeing here is a metafactory instance running connected to that GraphDB database that Todor was showing. So we have the same information accessible here. We see a simple Google-like search interface to start your interaction with that data. So let me just type something in here. And we will now see how many results we have per those different concepts. So we have one protein, one gene, 100 drugs matching our search term. We can now look at, for example, the resulting protein, and we see a number of information provided in here. The approach, as mentioned earlier with Metafactory, is a low-code approach, meaning this complete interface, the appearance as well as the information that is visible can be completely customized to your needs. And here we just see a number of what we consider relevant information for a protein. We can now jump into the details. And for that, we are following the principle of a linked data browser, meaning we are now on the page for this specific resource, for this specific protein, which is rendered from a template for how we want to see proteins displayed here. And in this interface is really targeted at more like the knowledge worker, business user, interacting with this information, doing some research. We have structured this by the providing data source. This is obviously unlikely to be the setup you will have in your environment. You most likely will have an integration and a mashup of information in different forms. But for the purpose of this demo, we felt that this is an interesting representation because it helps better to understand how the data from different data sources comes together. So before I will jump into more detail into this interface, we have at all times, this is connected to an expert interface, which really utilizes the full graph in the background. Let me just quickly reload the page. So we see the node we are currently on. We can see how this is connected to other nodes. So we can, for example, explore this by the encoded by relation. We can see here the gene that is connected to this protein. We can explore that by additional relations. For example, interaction. So let's just select two of those. We can see for those interactions, who are the interaction partners. So we see the other proteins in the same way we can do that here. And we see that this is an interaction most likely with it itself. We can explore further from that protein, for example, by enzyme, and all of this information, can be dynamically explored. We have something called a knowledge panel where we can see a short summary of relevant information for each of those entities. So in this case, for the enzyme in this view here. With that, let's quickly jump back to this more simplified interface. So here we have that exact same information, just pre-arranged into certain tables and so on. So we can, for example, see that this protein is targeted by 2 drugs. We can see which drugs those are. We could directly navigate to them. So everything is interlinked. All the information is directly interlinked, and you can really explore everything from here. We see assay information from ChEMBL as well as the protein classification. We have transcript, molecular function, biological process, and cellular component information from Ensembl. We have reactome information integrated here, which we can then also not only visualize with this tree and table, but for example, again, utilize this graph view. And what you can already see here is that each of those components can be parameterized with a specific information need. So in this case, we don't have this, blank exploration where we just start out from the node, but we can have this pre-populated with the protein, with all of the connecting pathway steps, other proteins interacting with that. So we get an overview of that right away. And then you can still go in here and further explore that the diagram from here along the other available relations. We have SNP information from GWAS Catalog, and we get quick statistics here by disease, citations from UniProt. There's a basic protein viewer integrated within here. And again, an overview of the drugs. In this case, we showed it again as a graph to allow you to further explore. So we can, for example, see the details on that specific drug. And from here, we can then also do a navigation. So navigate to that drug here. So we see that a different template is applied. In this case, this is not as far built out as we saw the one for protein. So we just have some basic information and protein interaction information structured in here, which we can filter by additional facets. And here we can also have a quick look behind the cover. So we see the configuration here is derived from a template. So we have a template for drugs that is defined here, and we can also have a template for that knowledge panel summary we saw earlier. So let's look at the template for a drug. And we see here a number of configurations for that search. And we can also jump into the details of that. And what I wanted to quickly show is for example, how we are displaying a table. So we have the semantic table component in here. The way you configure it is just with a Sparkle query, selecting the relevant information. And that is then how you configure and display a table with information. You might have seen that there are also download buttons. So there's a button to do a CSV download of the content in that table. And you can then again define its own Sparkle query for how you want to transform that data when exporting that to CSV. And in the same way, you can also have a chart defined. So we had a chart in there which showed the SNPs by diseases. And again, this is nothing but a Sparkle query defining this chart, the definition that we want to have a bar chart, and then mapping the resulting variables from that query, the tissue and the number of interaction proteins into that result.
Bastian, if you allow a quick question, could you give us a sense of what is the time needed to come up with such a custom tailored user interface on top of graph data? Let's say for limited number of use cases, but still if you see this preclinical discovery project that Todor described, how much time did it take to come up with custom interface?
Yeah, I want to talk about that in some more detail in a second, but what we basically achieve here is that within a very short time frame of like 1 to 2 weeks, we are able to create a first minimal viable product of relevant interfaces, support a use case, and then we can further iterate in 1 week iterations. What we see here, this system is in an effort in the range of 2 to 4 weeks. So this is fairly fast to achieve such an interactive interface. And then the large benefit is that this is really just some configuration, some Sparkle queries you have to adjust to further develop that. As part of that, I also want to look into that quickly. We also have an interface to manage and model the ontology. So in many cases, this is the starting point. Now here we have mostly public data. There's a good understanding of ontologies and how this data should be modeled already. But in most use cases, there is a need to further expand on that. So while we have here modeled the basic relations between drugs, proteins, genes, diseases, you might have additional concepts that are relevant in your domain. So here you can collaboratively model together with your users, bring in for example, the concept of a pathway or something like that, and then introduce relevant connections here to gene products. And with that model, going back to what you were presenting earlier, we're creating this data literacy. We are enabling all of the participating stakeholders to understand what we are actually talking about. What is the domain we are modeling? What are the different information sources providing information into? And on top of that, we can then easily build a user interface to support a specific use case. So let me quickly jump into the presentation here. So if we look at this combination of GraphDB and MetaFactory to enable you to build out your use cases in R&D, GraphDB brings you the data integration layer together with about 200 preloaded public life science data sets and ontologies that you can use to get started right away. I saw there were a few questions on the Q&A around, where's the value in that? I mean, they're public available. You can already use them. The value is that you have that all integrated and you get started with that in a central search interface that's under your control, where you can, slice and dice the information to your need, represent it in the way your users want to interact with it. And then additionally, on top of that, you can expand that model. You can add additional internal proprietary data sources. You can bring in things like, discussions, comments, information from your internal users. So the interface we saw was mostly on the exploration, but with MetaFactory, you can also build an interface that is not only searching, filtering, exploration, but can also allow your users to add and edit data to contribute to this information and expand the graph on their own. And for that, we have a number of web components that you can just put together to such an interface and configure through the Sparkle language. Additionally, Ontotext also brings in the capability to virtualize existing data sources, so you don't even have to materialize that data into your knowledge graph, but you can use existing, for example, SQL systems and virtualize that data into the knowledge graph and have an integrated view on top of that. So altogether, this is the foundation to build a human and machine understandable data fabric and support any kind of use cases that could be relevant on top of that. And the approach for that is fairly simple. So you already saw what Toda was presenting on around building that knowledge graph. I talked about the right away available data sources. We can then utilize MetaFactory to visualize that information. So you always have an interface to validate data, to share this with your domain experts to see if they find any issues with how the data was mapped and integrated. We would then together define a real specific business requirement, a specific information need that you want to satisfy. And that can be as simple as going forward, we want to, whenever we agree on a specific target for further research, we want to be able to document the exact history of how we derived at that target, why this specific target was chosen, which of the research information, which of the data sources have been taken into account, and have a digital history of such a decision. And we capture UX expectations, so who are the different users who would be interacting with that, what kind of interaction would they expect. We will then together build out that knowledge graph model, that ontology with the visual editor, having the domain users, the end users on the table from the beginning in also defining this information model. We can then utilize additional data from Ontotext, from the inventory to tie that in right away or augment that with your own data. And then we build out that user interface based on our low-code platform which then after just 2 weeks, you can already review with your business, with your end users, get their feedback and go into another iteration. And the idea is that we help you bootstrap all of that, but that going forward, after 1 or 2 iterations, you can run that with your team. Your team can get trained on that methodology as well as on the specific technology stack. And you can build that on your own, have those fast iterations and quick results with very low maintenance because you're building on top of a vendor-supported platform that is ready to use. Okay, so with that, thanks a lot for the attention and for your interest in this solution. We are currently offering a limited 6-week free trial. So this is usually we have a shorter trial period available, but we decided that we want to offer you a full 6 weeks to try this out. So if you follow that link, which will also be shared after the webinar with you again, you can sign up for this trial with GraphDB and Metafactory integrated. If you already are a GraphDB user, you can just get the Metafactory and connect that to your GraphDB, or you can get the full package and start out with that. With that, Ilya, back to you for Q&A.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thanks also, Todor, to you. We have a good number of questions, so let's try to address most of them. So a quick answer from me to Alex Henderson question: does your platform handle RDF star? Yes, it does. Is there a trial version of linked live data available online? Happy to hear this question. Linked live data is one of the, actually, if not the oldest, and maybe one of the biggest repositories created with life sciences public data. Maybe Todor, you can share something more. I just want to let you know that it's still available freely online on linked live data. I think I pasted the URL in my answer anyway. Todor, would you like to add something?
Yeah, more? Just a disclaimer, maybe because of the high interest, the service currently is down. I'm going to check with the team and to revive it. But link live data is a result from an European funded project maybe 10 years ago. We still keep the service up in order to be used by the scientific community. It's a really very easy platform to start experimenting with knowledge graph, Sparkle, RDF, and to see what is possible to be achieved. It currently still integrates more than 30 different public data sources, also information extracted from scientific articles, in this case, PubMed abstracts, and could be used for freely. Apologies for that the service is down. I'll check it and we'll restart the service once again.
Thank you, Todor. A question to Metafacts, as it seems. How does Metafacts support drug / product development? And another one, which is quite different, what is meant by facts extraction? Maybe we can handle those separately. So, Sebastian, would you like to take on the first question? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So on the drug and product development side, one piece is, as I mentioned already, for example, the target discovery. And there are a number of other research-heavy steps in that, which are, I would say, those are the easy to achieve ones with a knowledge graph. This is where you can get value quite quickly by bringing those data sources together, providing one integrated research interface for people to find relevant information, finding it in a structured way, being able to document their findings, and giving you a full, auditable path of how you derived at a specific decision. This does not mean we are, replacing existing analytics tools or anything like that. There are a number of things that you have in your workbench that you probably will still be using. But the big challenge we see is finding the relevant information and making sure that any kind of analytics and other things you're actually doing on all of the relevant data. And that is where our joint solution here can support by providing a search interface on top of such an integrated knowledge graph.
Thank you, Sebastian. And on the second part of the question, what is meant by facts extraction? Maybe Todor.
Although this was not the focus of the current webinar, it's worth mentioning that actually one of our core expertise is to marry the two technologies, knowledge graphs with NLP. And actually, the solutions we built provide very deep text analytical capabilities in which we are able to identify concepts from the knowledge graph mentioned within the various kinds of unstructured content. It could be documents, it could be a structured field from databases, datasets, internal, public one, it doesn't matter. In addition, we use the ontology or the knowledge graph behind it to disambiguate, to better contextualize the name entities that we identify in the text, and also to provide additional information within the annotated text. And beyond just the simple name entity extraction, we also provide custom tailored text analysis pipeline for targeted relation extraction, like, for example, processing of case reports to identify reported safety adverse events, but not only just mentioning of a condition, but to reconstruct a subgraph of all the different, for example, demographic data, additional patient information like age and gender, current diagnosis, particular treatment for this diagnosis, additional medical procedures, diagnosis procedures applied, and also the actual treatment and the cause of this treatment, a reported adverse event. All the information is back populated in the knowledge graph and extend and further enrich the information available in the knowledge graph, keeping back provenance to a sentence level from where actually this particular fact was extracted.
Thank you, Todor. A question to Sebastian from Marcelo Barbieri. Is it possible to model sub-properties with the metafactory ontology visual tool?
That's a very good question. I'm not 100% sure. So I know that we absolutely do subclass relations, which I think we also had in the demo. I would have to check on the status of sub-properties. What we do model around attributes as well as relations is cardinalities. That's something we have very often seen as a very important piece. So you can have specific min-max cardinalities for which we use a shackle as an extension to just OWL to implement that as well.
Okay, thank you. A question by Santia Balaji. Can we use Ontotext for getting insights on pharmaceutical formulation development as well? Todor, would you like to take this?
This is for me. Okay, yeah. In general, what we just demoed here is a technology and a product platform on top of a technology. If we load the appropriate data sources and we integrate them in a appropriate way, we can cover all the different use cases and needs. However, we cannot replace the domain experts who will need to define the use cases that needs to be covered by the appropriate data and the analytical functionalities on top of it. So the quick answer is yes, we can cover it, but in order to be really absolutely sure, we need to discuss with you the specifics of the use case and to back up it with appropriate data sets available in-house, also if necessary to complement them with also public information.
And this can also be a topic of, how you really want to interact with this data. So we have, for example, built such use cases where you have a chemical structure search as part of that and such things. So this would really, need a more detailed assessment. But I think, yes, the joint experience is that even if you might not be able to do an end-to-end implementation in a knowledge graph, and you still need other tools that you already have in your tool chain, it is likely that there's an information and data integration aspect, as well as an aspect of having a semantic model on parts of your data that would be beneficial to support your process.
Thank you both. A question to Sebastian: can metafacts replace the usual querying of the graph database to extract insights? If yes, what's the difference, or how it is different?
Yeah. So you have a Sparkle console in MetaFactory as well, but yes, there is no difference. You can do the same thing in GraphDB. What we allow you to build is also a visual query builder, for example. So we have seen the keyword search option where you specify a keyword. We have other options like a keyword interpretation engine that maps keywords directly to relations and concepts in the graph, as well as to instances like what we saw here. We have this visual query building option where you can say, well, I'm looking for a gene that is related to a protein via a certain relation, which is related to a pathway via another relation. So you can visually build a query similar to what Todo was showing with that Sparkle query, meaning your user does not need to know Sparkle, and you can provide it to someone just understanding the domain and not necessarily being a very technical Sparkle savvy user.
Thank you. Another question from Alex Anderson. Can you limit access to different parts of the graph? For example, if part of the graph is covered by certain ethics or proprietary limitations, can those parts of the graph or subparts of the graph be protected by a password or in any other way?
I think there are answers on every level. Todo,
exactly.
The database level.
Yes, I wanted just to a single sentence. Yeah, on the database level, you have multiple mechanisms. You can put your sensitive data in a separate repository within GraphDB, which could be protected with specific credentials. And then on application level, of course, you can apply filtering graphs context. But Sebastian can explain more on application level.
Yeah, exactly. So depending on the separation you have chosen on the database level, we can then, for example, do a transparent Sparkle federation over a number of repositories and control access to the underlying repository by user or group. We can control that on a level of a named graph. We can have that even down to a specific Sparkle query or visualization component where we control by group what exact information is displayed and available to them. So we can get quite fine granular on the application, on the user interface towards the user.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the last question, because we are approaching the end of the hour. How do you handle domain-specific entities through NLP? So this is an assumption of Krishna with a Y. Is it customized? So is this customizable? So maybe Todor, you can address this
speaking
one.
about NLP, we don't believe in a generic NLP. We always build our NLP pipelines with the notion what type of a use case we need to cover, or use cases, or general target. And for that purpose, we actually built initially the knowledge graph that will guarantee that the correct entities will be available in the knowledge graph, and from there will also be used by the pipeline. And then about ambiguity of one and the same entity in different contexts, this can be solved in many various types of techniques, and it depends on actually the use case.
Thank you, guys. We managed to cover almost all questions. It's actually exactly an hour as we started. I believe it's better to call it a day. So you will get a recording of this webinar, of course, as we announced this in the beginning, and also all questions that we didn't manage to address, you will get answers in writing. Thanks a lot for coming. I hope that this was a useful webinar for you. Let's stay in touch. Take care and have a nice day. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.